Oh, you damn right. Recruiting never stops. It's another recruiting hour right here on Orange Bloods Live. We appreciate having you in. Remember to like, subscribe, get those notifications. The coaching staff has a couple shakeups during the week, and we'll talk about what that means for recruiting. That's Jason Sukamel, of course. I'm Chad Hastings. And before we get cranked up, let's tell you about Longhorn Wealth Management. You see John's picture down there? We'll show you another picture of John and remind you this is Longhorn through and through. UT alum, 6 siblings, and his wife. They are all UT grads. They're pumped about everything Longhorn, and it's why you call the company Longhorn Wealth Management Group, dedicated to providing investment, retirement, insurance, and estate planning services and solutions to Longhorn families and friends across the nation over 30 years. John is always dialed in and following stories. He is excited that Sark was able to bring Akina back into the fold. He expects Coach Akina to continue the great DB recruiting and development going forward. No pressure, Coach. John does expect it, though. To celebrate that homecoming, John wants to celebrate by offering all Orange Bloods Live fans a free 90-minute private consultation. You can call John and the Wealth team at 972-707-4900 or go online to longhornwealth.net. Schedule that free 90-minute private consultation with John. Thanks to Longhorn Wealth Management for being a great partner. Thanks to all of you who are already jumping in the Specs chat. Emojis all over the place from Mike Moe with some emojis. Y'all jump in with super chats as well. They'll go right to the top of the list. Jason, great to see you as always. So coaching shakeup, I think it's done for now. One of the big ones this week, though, of course, was the running back coach situation. And there was some immediate reactions to Tashard Choice leaving. Then, of course, you got to figure out who the new guy is. We know now that is Chad Scott. And we're going to talk about some of the reaction to that today. And it's, I think, all three of these big names we talked about before. But if I'm a Longhorn fan, I want to know if this shakeup affected the chances. So which one of these guys do we start with today in your mind?
Oh, we can start with the Xavier Crowell. Yeah, it wasn't, it's dead period, right, Chad? So you kind of think, it's going to kind of be a slow week. Well, not really. It was a pretty active week of recruiting. You got some new offers and, new visits getting set up and visits getting canceled, and Friday night news breaks around the running back situation. So thankfully I was home Friday night just doing taxes, actually. Can you think of a more boring Friday nights? But
don't have to tell me.
I got to get to the computer, do some work. So the big news is, and we'll talk, like you said, about the running back situation. Okay, they announced the Chad Scott hire to replace Tashard Choice. Well, Xavier, I tell you what, let me back up a little bit. Let's do it in chronological order, Chad. Okay. So let's start with Xavier Osborne, the running back out of Forney. But he kind of started the fireworks on Friday early evening. He issued a tweet or a post on X, and it said, "I will not," and it was NOT capitalized, "be visiting Texas on June 13th. Well, that gets everybody all up in arms, everybody in Austin and on orangebloods.com, because for a long time, people thought Texas was the team to beat for Xavier Osborne, right? Maybe Michigan, there's some other schools in play there, but everything seemed to be favoring Texas for a long time. In fact, I think I've got my future cast in for Texas. I probably, and I'm not writing Texas off in this, but I probably should change that to Michigan right now. I think Michigan would be the team to beat. So Javian tweets that Friday night that he will not be visiting Texas. I start texting him or DMing with him, and I said, "Hey, just to clarify, he's on the 13th, he said, I said, are you rescheduling or you're not visiting at all?" He says he's not visiting at all. He probably won't even come in the spring for a visit. And this is a guy who was just here for the junior day, right? Who's, been pretty open about how strongly he feels about Texas. He didn't get into specifics, but he just said, "Hey, with the way Coach Choice leaving," and just didn't really sit well with him. He was kind of eliminating Texas. Well, what happens right after that, is Chad Scott sees that tweet and gets on the phone with Javion Osborne. They have a nice initial conversation. So I talked to Javion on Sunday evening. And he said, yeah, Coach Scott called me and we talked after that. He kind of introduced himself and he told me, that I am still very high on their board. And he understands when he looked at my film and stuff, he understands why Texas had me so highly rated on their board. He didn't reschedule the Texas visit, Chad, but he said he's considering it's a possibility. He mentioned Notre Dame as a possibility for that other visit. He mentioned Florida State for a possibility for that other visit. He's got 4 visits. Taking that Texas one off the board opens up 1 week. So we'll see how this plays out. I mean, those visits aren't till June. My gut tells me Texas will wind up getting him back on campus, Chad. And my reason for saying that, he loved Tashard Choice. Loved Tashard Choice. And he even said, hey, Chad Scott maybe will be amazing, because I don't have an impression yet. I've only had 1 conversation. But even if he's tremendous, he's not Tashard Choice. That was basically what Xavier said. And that's how strongly he felt about Tashard Choice. So can Texas, get back in this thing? Absolutely. It's going to take a little bit of time. It's going to take a little bit of work. But you've got till June. What you just need to hope is he doesn't, next week schedule that visit for like Notre Dame or something. Then you're on the outside looking in. So, if I'm Chad Scott, I'm probably hitting him up every other day, just with a little message here or there. I'm calling him once a week, trying to get him on campus, maybe in late March when Texas starts their spring season, get him on campus, and you get that official visit possibly, and, things are back on track. But right now, yeah, Texas is definitely playing from behind, and Chad Scott's got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, it's really interesting. But in a way, like you said, some good news that it wasn't complete. The reaction you imagine is, like you said, a lot about Tashard Choice. It's almost like you're giving the coach the respect to say, hey, this was my relationship. This was my guy. Maybe a little bit of a freak out, but who doesn't freak out on text and social media, Jason, with capital letters when it's unnecessary, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, people freaked out on Orange Bloods about Xavier. And I'm like, dude, he's 17, maybe even 16. I don't know. He's a junior in high school. And he truly is. I think I said this maybe on the modcast. He's like the most respectful kid ever. Show the kid some grace. I mean, he didn't do anything wrong. And Xavier, I think there was a bit of a lack of communication after Choice left. It was only like a week and a half, right? So, some of the Texas coaches were on vacation. I mean, they're doing other stuff. So, I see both sides of it. If you're Javian, you would have liked a call from somebody, just said, hey, we know Tashard's gone, but Javian, you're our guy. We're going to make this right hire, and whoever we hire, you're still going to be a top priority. You would love to hear that if you're Javian Osborne. But if you're Texas, you're like, hey, man, we filled that spot in a week and a half. It's not like it dragged out for a month and a half. So I see both sides. I don't find fault in either side in this. I really don't. But I think Javian, in a perfect world, hindsight being 2020, and it's easy to say now, of course, I think probably Texas maybe would have stayed in communication with him after Tashard left and before he issued that tweet.
Yeah, maybe we give him a little deference there. If I had had access to capital letters, Jason, when Luka got traded to your Lakers, there would have been a lot of capital letters.
Last night was fun, right?
Oh, yeah, that was great. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks a lot for that.
Yeah,
I'm sure you enjoyed it. We remind everybody at orangebloods.com right now, Jason's 321 article is there. A lot of this running back stuff is discussed there if you want to see it in more detail. And Jason, before we leave kind of and you mentioned Osborne there, and correct me if I'm wrong, this may be Crowell that I'm discussing here, but the fact that I believe it was Crowell that was contacted and felt like, hey, I was one of their first priorities with this new coach. Maybe as we're transitioning to a little more talk on Crowell, I have that right? That was Crowell that got that treatment?
Yeah, it's a chronological order because Xavier Osborne issued his tweet first. He's not visiting. And then later that night, about 10 o'clock, Xavier Crowell tweets, my visit to Texas is back on. And so Xavier Crowell, the day Tashard Choice, it was announced that he was leaving, Xavier Crowell said, I will no longer be visiting Texas.
Right.
So it's kind of a flip of Xavier Osborne. I mean, almost complete opposite of what happened with Osborne. So Crowell, interestingly, I think Osborne probably got the first call, if I'm thinking about this, because he tweeted around 5:30-ish or something, 5 o'clock hour. And I think my understanding is that Chad Scott called him like right after that. Crowell tweeted about 10 o'clock. So I'm assuming he got the call maybe 8, 9 o'clock. But bottom line is, I mean, both those guys got calls from Chad Scott on Friday. But Crowell, you're right, had canceled his visit, Chad. He tweeted, "Hey, that's back on the table." You know, I talked to Crowell over the weekend and just said, "Okay, let's take me through this conversation." And he said it was just Coach Scott just called him up and kind of introduced himself and said, "Here's what I've done and how I like to produce backs." And if I read his quote, he said, he just talked about Texas, how they hired him, and how he's ready to get to work. He was amped up, ready to get on the phone with me. And he did say, "Hey, it was amazing being one of the first priorities to get that call, from basically the first day when he could start working the phone." So the good news is that visit's still on. Crowell is the nation's #1 ranked running back. There's a lot of chatter. He's out of Alabama. There's a lot of talk out of Alabama and Georgia. He actually showed up at a 7-on-7 event last week, Chad, a 2-day event. One day he had Alabama gloves. One day he had Georgia gloves on. So I was like, well, you would like to see a pair of Longhorn gloves in that mix. But, sometimes these kids do these things to play games. So
maybe just 2 days, 2 pairs of gloves.
I think so. I just saw it on social media. I don't remember. I think it was out West Coast or something. But I believe so. I think he just wore one pair one day, one pair the other day. So I said somebody needs to send that kid some Longhorn gloves so we can drum up some suspense in Austin. But that visit is back on. He'll be in early June. He'll take that Texas visit. He's got Georgia May 30th, Texas June 6th, Auburn June 13th, Florida State June 15th. So that'll be a midweek visit. And then Alabama gets the last crack out on June 20th. So, listen, I think Texas has an uphill climb there. But the fact that you're getting on campus for an official visit shows me there's a genuine interest. He's been there before. He came in for the Georgia game last year. But getting him back for an official visit will be big for Texas. They're now back in the mix for Xavier Crowell.
That would be huge. And then just kind of leaning back towards Osborne a second, you mentioned that it's still a possibility, but it's not on the calendar. Are you still thinking it could be that June 13th weekend? Is he still got that one open? Is that the one to fill for him?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. All of his other weekends in June and even in May are filled up. So that is the only available weekend. I mean, you could find a weekend in May, but Texas doesn't traditionally do that. Texas really only does June visits, as we found out with Boobie Feaster. Boobie tried to schedule for the last week of May, and Texas is like, nah, we'd rather have you come in June, and that's what we do. So that June 13th weekend for Xavier and Osborne is open. He's going to fill it with a visit somewhere. He's just trying to figure out where. Will it be Texas? We'll see. I mean, my gut instinct thinks it will be Texas, but I don't think Xavier even knows the answer to that right now.
Gotcha. All right. We're talking running back recruiting mainly today. Not that we won't talk some other stuff, but running back coach changes. Chad Scott's the new guy. The reactions of some of the biggest running backs that we've talked about. We'll get right back to that discussion and talk about what the young man from Carthage thought about Chad Scott getting the gig. We'll do that after we thank Specs for being a great sponsor. Those of you piling in, hundreds of you in the Specs chat right now. Remember, the wine sale continues for another couple days.
Ooh la la, what a fabulous selection. I think I found my perfect pairing. You and Specs low prices.
Specs huge wine sale going on now.
Yep, and if you weren't turned towards the graphic, March 1st is when that wine sale ends. So make sure you get that bottle you've been thinking about before March 1st. Get you a little sale there. Good morning, Uncle Mickey from
Mickey, you're a loyal Canadian viewer. I love it.
Right, north of the border. Morning, Hoser. Ed B also sending us a little emoji love today. All right,
the term they use in Canada.
What's that?
Is hoser still a term they use in Canada? Mickey could let us know that.
I don't know. That probably makes me old.
The only reason I know hoser, did you ever watch the movie Strange Brew?
You know what? I've never seen Strange Brew, but I know the rest. I need to sit through that movie one time because I love Moranis and was it Dave Thomas? Is that the guy?
I don't remember who the other one was. My brother,
Dave, whatever. Yeah, I dig those guys. I've seen clips of it. I've just never sat down for the whole movie.
Oh, dude, like we probably watched it 100 times when we were like in middle school. Even made our parents watch it with us at some point. I could quote every line from that thing. I haven't seen it in probably 30 years, but I'd probably watch it now and be like, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? But that was like seriously a staple of my childhood. Yeah.
A lot of hosers in there. Hey, hoser.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it is one of the ways I know it got into pop culture. Uncle Mickey, let us know if hosers a big still a big thing in Canada. All right, so the third running back we want to make sure we mention here, Jason, is KJ Edwards from Carthage. So now take us through this timeline of choice out, Chad Scott in, KJ Edwards' response to it.
KJ, I haven't connected with him directly, but I've talked to him before they made the hire after Tashard Choice had left. So I kind of have a feel. He wasn't that worked up about it. He still had his Texas visit on the calendar. He's not one that pulled back. He just kind of said, hey, man, I have faith in Texas. Whoever they hire is going to be good. But he did say, I'm all about relationships, right? So I'll have to work to develop a relationship with with whoever they hire. So, him and Chad Scott have talked. I haven't talked to KJ to get a read on that. I need to work on that maybe for this weekend. But KJ still got his Texas visit. He's going to take a Texas visit in June. A&M is surging there. A&M's doing a good job. He wants to stay close to home. So other in-state schools are going to get him. Uncle Mickey distracted me. Hoser is old school, but I still love it.
Yeah.
But
anyway, Hoser. Anyway, there, Hoser.
But yeah, I look for KJ to stay close to home, Chad. Ultimately, I think it'll come down to Texas and Texas A&M. I've kind of felt that way for a while. I mentioned in my 3-2-1, Texas cannot afford to miss on Xavier Osborne and KJ Edwards. You've got to get one of those two. There was a time when Tashard Choice was here. I thought, hey, maybe they'll be able to get both of them. Now, that seems a little more unlikely. So I expect Texas to continue to be ultra aggressive with KJ Edwards. He'll take that visit in June. He's also going to visit A&M, of course. I do think that one comes down to Texas and Texas A&M. Pretty tough one to call right now.
I do love the thought of a running back from Carthage trying to pick between the Longhorns and the Aggies. That sounds like a good soap opera to me. Jason, let me throw in another here. Let's put it on the other side of it in terms of you got to get one of them. Would you say today, as we're recording here on this Wednesday, they've got to get one, Osborne or Edwards, and they've got to get one, Turntine or Ojo, offensive line wise?
That's good.
Is that?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I mean, and listen, both of those, they're going to try to get both guys, right?
Sure.
They're going to try to get both running backs. They're going to try to get both offensive tackles. But yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, if you miss on both those in-state running backs, if Texas somehow missed on both of those in-state linemen, you never want to say catastrophic with this staff because they're going to continue to recruit well. They're going to put together a good class, but that's borderline catastrophic, especially if you miss on both those offensive tackles. I mean, you've got to get one, knock on wood. If you can make it happen, you get both of them. You definitely have to get one of those guys.
Gotcha. All right. So again, Chad Scott coming from West Virginia. It's a guy that's called offensive plays in Power 4 football. Maybe can help Sark in the red zone. I know a lot of Longhorn fans have mentioned that discussion. But there's your reaction from some of the big names. Overall, nothing catastrophic with these three guys in terms of turning their back totally on the Texas discussion. Just to make sure we finish off with Edwards, Jason. That visit is set for June. Which weekend for KJ?
It's gone back and forth. It was the 6th, then the 13th. I think it's going to be the 6th, but I need to confirm that with KJ. But I believe it'll be June 6th.
So maybe Crowell and Edwards in on the same weekend.
Could be. And if it's the 13th, maybe him and Xavier Osborne on the same weekend. So,
yeah. Chad Scott. Either way, you're up. That'll be a huge weekend, one way or the other. So two backs coming in for one weekend, one of the big backs in another situation. It'll be interesting to see which combo that is. Does the number one guy in the country get the weekend all to himself in terms of running backs, or is he going to be sharing it a little bit with one of these Texas guys?
I mean, it's interesting because the 13th is kind of setting up to be the big visit weekend. So if they're bringing those dudes in on the 6th, that'll be interesting. Is that just because they're already booked elsewhere on the 13th, or is that just because Texas is trying to kind of maneuver some things around? I don't know. We'll see. Again, we got a few months to figure that out.
It'll be interesting to see. All right. We also told you, of course, Jason's got that 3-2-1 article out there. Part of the 3-2-1 this week, Jason, you hit a little Q&A. Always popular when the Q&A comes up. So we're going to hit a couple of these. We won't get to all of them. You can obviously go check out the article itself for all the Q&A, but occasion. Now, Jason, for people that are interested here, the Q&A, is it always open to the folks, or is it a certain time you ask for the questions? How does it work?
I haven't done it in my 3-2-1 before. This is the first time I've ever done it. Used to be, I would always do a 3-2-1 one week and a Q&A one week, and I'd alternate them, right? Mm-hmm. Well, now I do the 3-2-1 every week, but I was like, I haven't done a Q&A. Let's just integrate that into the 3-2-1. So, but what I do, Chad, is I just solicit questions from Orange Blood subscribers. They either email them to me or they post them on Orange Blood. So yeah, those are questions, I'll just usually come out like on whatever Sunday, Monday morning and say, hey, shoot me some recruiting questions. So these are cut and paste questions sent in by subscribers. So any typos, don't blame me. All right. Just cutting and pasting. But yeah, they are actually questions from our readers, from our subscribers, from Longhorn fans.
All right. So let's get to one of the most popular questions you always get. For a certain group of Longhorn fans, there are 3 things that fuel them, Jason: Sooner tears, Aggie tears, and the thought of a number 1 class. So the question is, can we pencil in back-to-back number 1 classes? See, this fan can't even be satisfied with one. They want to start stacking up number 1 classes. What do you think?
Yeah, normally the question I get every single week is, where will this class rank? But this poster is shooting for the moon. Can we pencil in back-to-back number 1 classes? I said, my answer was, yeah, you can pencil it in, but you better have an eraser on that pencil, because it's tough, man, it's tough to get 1 number 1 class. To get 2 back to back. Georgia's done it. I think Alabama probably did it at some point under Saban. That's really tough. And Texas only has 3 commitments. So I thought about this, Chad, before we came on here. Last year, Texas had 4 5-star commitments. Okay. And I'm just kind of using that as a barometer of what you have to get the number 1 class. And Texas won the honor of having the number 1 class by the slimmest of margins. Literally the slimmest of margins, right? It was the closest race it's ever been in the history of Rivals.com. They edged out Georgia. So if you're saying, okay, you got to get in that ballpark with 4 5-star commitments, Diabell could get in that category, right? So he's about 20 spots off right now. If I'm looking at the current 5-stars, Blaine Bradford, a safety out of Louisiana, Texas is in on him. Tyler Atkinson, a linebacker out of Georgia, Texas is in on him. Texas wants to get in on Tristan Keys. That's going to be tough. Booby Feaster, we've talked about. Texas is in the race there, of course. Could a guy like KJ Edwards bump up to 5-star? Turn time, Felix Ojo. Jalen Lotz. You're going to have to get probably around 4 of those dudes. Maybe 3 could do it. Maybe have to get to 5. So, there's a lot of work to be done. Mark Bowman, a tight end out of California, is kind of in that 5-star conversation. But there's a lot of work to be done. Xavier Crowell, I should, of course, mention him. But Texas is in the mix with a lot of those types of guys. So, it's hard to say. Rankings change. Some of these guys we're talking about will wind up not being 5-stars. Others that are not 5-stars will move into 5-star category. Can Texas get a number 1 class? Yes. Would I bet on it? No, I don't think I'd comfortably put my money on it. Not right now when they're sitting at 3 commitments.
Okay, there it is. So the question about number 1 classes. And again, send your questions in to Jason anytime you like. Jason, there was another one I wanted to get your thoughts on because it made me feel kind of old, but I thought your answer was interesting. I wanted you to throw it out here on the show. The question was, if you're a great high school running back, what are your top 5 most attractive college destinations? Do kids still think the way they did decades ago when wearing the burnt orange or SC colors was irresistible?
Yeah, my answer is my top 5. It's tough. I said Texas probably. I'm old school too. So I said USC, even though I don't know they have a great history of late. Georgia, Alabama, and I said probably Ohio State. You could say Penn State now with Saquon Barkley. There's different programs you could say. But, young kids today, like recruits, might have a totally different top 5 than mine, right?
Yeah.
You and I have been watching football a long time. These are the ones that I mentioned are the blue bloods that have been doing it for a long, long time. Somebody might send Boise State this year after what Ginty did last year. So, but the question, I said, do kids still think the way they did decades ago when wearing the burnt orange or USC colors was irresistible? Absolutely not. That doesn't matter. there's so many other factors now, including NIL. Obviously, we got to state the obvious, but they're not going to USC because of the history that USC has had for 40 years or whatever of producing running backs. They're not going to Texas because Earl Campbell and Ricky Williams and, you know, the recent run, you know, Bijan and Roshan. That might help a little bit, but probably not. They're not just looking at it like, hey, I love those colors. But, you know, if it's about production, you know, if Chad Scott says, hey, I put this many backs in the NFL, or if Tashard Choice was here and says, hey, look at these backs I put in, boom, 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 year after year after year, first round, second round picks. Look what I've done. Yeah, that matters more than just, you know, the big picture. Oh, Texas has had running back success for, you know, going back to the 70s. So do kids still think the same? No, probably not. So, but there's so many other factors that go into it, but it's not really about long-term history of the running back position.
When I read this, Jason, I thought of a couple things. Like, I think there's 2 times in maybe these kids' lives where it would be important. If they fall in love with football, like if they start becoming a football fan and playing between, let's say, the ages of, 5 and 10, 5 and 12, something like that. If they saw somebody on TV, maybe that could affect them. Yeah. But then I also think it's right as they're getting ready to make these decisions, like who's at the forefront. I can think of Texas running backs recently that mattered. I can think of Georgia running backs. When you said Ohio State, I'm like, yeah, exactly. I can think of those guys. You know, do kids care about Oregon? Not just because of the unis, but Bucky Irving and guys like this. Like, they've had a pretty good running game for a little while. So I don't know. You know, I would definitely agree with you. I don't think whatever led kids back in the day to go Texas or USC, it's not the same stuff. Especially USC. Like you said, I'm trying to think of like the last, oh my God, stud, you know, that USC had. Those unis are still badass. I mean, they're going to be that way. But it is interesting. And then just also the evolution of football itself, because I don't care where you go nowadays as a running back, you're not going to play the same football, maybe unless you are Genty. I guess they kind of gave him the ball enough. Old school. You don't get old school carries anymore. You don't get old school workload anymore. It's a different discussion to me.
Yeah, it is. And, you know, I'm trying to think of others. Michigan, you could throw in that conversation.
Sure. Yep.
In these backs now, like, a lot of them don't want to go to a place where they're getting 25 carries a game. They're fine getting 15 or, you know, getting 13 carries and 4 receptions and show off your versatility and keep some wear and tear off your body. They're thinking long term. They're thinking NFL. So, you know, there some of these. I mean, I've talked to running backs like, I'm perfectly fine being a part of a 2-man rotation, essentially. So it's a different world. We see it in the NFL. Even obviously, we see it in college. We saw it with Roshan and Bijan. We've seen it, you know, last year with Texas to some degree. Yeah, it's a different world with these running backs, and it's a different mindset now. But, you know, guys want to go somewhere where they're going to get developed, they're going to be able to have success, and they're going to have a chance to go to the league. I mean, that's what these guys want. That's what's important. Obviously, NIL, relationships, academics, close to home sometimes. Those types of things still matter, but those other things are the most important.
Yeah. I also think about a guy like KJ Edwards, old school, you know, a Carthage running back, might expect to continue to be the bell cow. But nowadays, Jason, it's probably like getting a new job and you realize, wait, I get paid more and I'm working less. Wait, that's a good thing. I just wonder now that how does the Carthage mindset translate into college? Because it's got to be a little different. It's got to be a little different than it used to be.
Yeah. And KJ's not a 20 carry a game back anyways. I mean, he's got the smaller frame. He's a guy that can work in space and do a lot of things. So, you know, KJ, wherever he goes, KJ will carve out his niche. But, you know, he's not who's the other back from Carthage that went to Texas and transferred to USC? Why can't I think of his name?
You're talking about
he went in the NFL. I can't think of his name. I'm drawing a blank. But you know, he's a different back than he was. I mean, because, you know, he was more of a between the tackles power runner. So.
Why do
I stumped both of us. So,
why do I have the letter K in my head?
Yes, exactly. I'm like,
Kavon
Dixon. No, Cavante was the brother. So
Kavon, no, okay, I don't have.
Cavante Dixon was the brother, but I think of the brother's name. Ingram, Ingram, right?
Keontae Ingram. Keontae, there it is. I knew there was a K. I could, see it.
Look at us. It took us a few minutes, but we put our brains together and pulled it out of our old brains. Yeah.
Jason, your reference was wide open. We just dropped it. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said it that way. All right. If you want to jump in on a chat or a super chat, the super chats will go right to the top of the list. Before we wrap it up, let's see a couple things. Oh, good tease for you. As soon as Jason's done with the recruiting hour today, Jason, you got an update on a big name on orangebloods.com. Tell the people what you can right now.
Yeah, everybody loves to hear about and from John Turntine. I was able to talk to John this week, thanks to the help of his dad was super cool and got John on the phone for me. So I talked to John just about kind of what's going on in his spring season. You know, Chad, he does, and John Turntine, of course, the Rivals 100, maybe 5-star offensive lineman out of North Crowley. He's got 3 official visits on the books. He's got, in order, Texas A&M, the first weekend of June, then Tennessee, then Texas June 20th. Those are the only 3 he's got. He does want to take more. He says he's going to add more visits there, but he's just not sure where he wants to visit. So to me, you know, if we're reading between the lines, I think that's a good omen for Texas A&M, Texas, and Tennessee, the fact that he knows he wants to visit those 3 places. This spring, you know, he's doing track and field, and he's got his own spring football stuff going on, or he will. So, but he did say he wants to get to Michigan for a visit, Missouri, which I thought was interesting. And he wants to go to Stanford. So he wants to go check out Stanford, which he's got a Stanford offer, which tells me, you know, he's obviously cares about academics and he's an intelligent kid, which I've kind of known that just from talking to him. But, you know, he did talk to Kyle Flood this week. I think it was Tuesday. He and Kyle Flood had a phone conversation. Flood said, "Hey, dude, just love to get you down here for spring practice." So Turntine said that'll happen too. He's planning on getting down to Austin before that June official visit. And then other than that, he's just focused on track and field. He's throwing the shot and the discus. He said he's working to put on weight. He actually lost quite a bit of weight last season and in the off season. So he's working to put on weight. He did tell me though, he said, "Hey, but I still have my strength. I just need to build up add some good weight." He said he's just squatted 545 the other day and benched 315. So, you know, he's got his weight room numbers are fine, but he did dip down a little bit in terms of the weight he's carrying on his frame. So he's working to build that back up. So, you know, I think Turntine, just knowing what I know of John, I think he's genuinely pretty open, Chad. I do. I mean, those 3 that he's going to visit, I'd probably put those on a different tier, but could I easily see a school like Michigan or Stanford or any of these other schools coming into play and jumping up in this race? Absolutely. I think he's keeping an open mind. I think he and his family are being very thorough with this evaluation of the recruiting process. Pardon me. So it's a tough one to predict. You know, I think Texas is in a good spot there, but it also could come down to numbers. What if Texas gets Felix Ojo? They've already got Max Wright committed at tackle. What if Zayden Krempin wants to commit early? Okay, you get Krempin and you get Ojo and you got Max Wright. Well, probably common sense would tell you then you're probably not going to get Turntine. What if Felix Ojo goes to Michigan or Ohio? Let's say Felix Ojo decides to commit to Ohio State. Well, then that makes Texas probably more attractive to Turntine. So there's a lot of moving parts here. You know, Texas has a lot of irons in the fire at offensive tackle. So, and some could affect the others, but I do think the Longhorns are in a good spot with John Turntine.
Yeah, and of course, don't laugh anymore at Michigan. I mean, at Michigan, at Missouri, especially being in on those offensive linemen. We learned that in the last cycle. They certainly have enough to get a discussion going with some of these big time.
And they hold them. Last cycle, they recruited well and they lost guys at the end. But Missouri, man, hey, right. I said this last year on the show with you. Like people kind of like, what's up with Missouri? I even had a source I was talking with this week. Like I was talking about this Turntine stuff. He's like, Missouri seems like an odd choice. But I'm like, but you know what? Missouri has surprisingly deep NIL pockets. Okay.
Yeah. Well, they do. They were.
People think Texas and Ohio State and Michigan and Alabama. I get it. But Missouri doesn't mind spending for elite guys. So
we couldn't have the full Fasusi discussion without discussing them. And then wasn't it Lamont Rogers, right? Right till the end?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, he's good.
Was the discussion for Missouri. And Rogers ended up at A&M and Missouri just missed, or did he end up at Missouri?
No, he went to A&M.
It's A&M, right? But it was Missouri right to the end with him.
Yeah, he flipped really late. I'd have to look at the timeline. But but he was committed for a long time. Yeah. So, but he ended up flipping to A&M. I think it was like right before signing day. Yeah, December 2nd. So he signed with A&M on December 3rd. So, I mean, literally the day before signing day, but he was committed to Missouri for 5 months. So,
yeah. Tigers ain't playing when it comes to NIL. Definitely a team
really likes Missouri too.
Keep in mind. Yeah. And we've talked about that too, Jason. There's something about that room at Missouri. Guys are drawn to it.
I don't remember the offensive line coach's name, but I do remember Lamont and Fasusi saying, hey, that dude is an incredible recruiter. So,
yeah, something to keep in mind. All right, Jason, before we wrap up, anything else we need to hit? Obviously, we talked a lot about the Chad Scott move. Any other comments from you today? Maybe it's Dwayne Akina coming back or another recruit you got your eyes on. Anything else we need to hit?
Yeah, I've got a couple other guys I've talked to. Just there's been so much content, I'm trying to spread it out. But Luke Sorensen is a tight end. We've never talked about him, Chad. He's out of Anaheim, California. He's got 5 visits set up, Texas being one of them. Talked to him this week. He's trying to get into Austin for a spring practice, then again for the official visit in June. He's never been to Texas before, so I thought it was interesting that Texas is kind of in that top 5-ish, maybe 6, he said. A&M's in there also. He's a California kid. In Texas has a shot because he really likes Jeff Banks. He really likes their tight end development of late, right? With what they did with Gunnar Helm, JT Sanders. But he's also very much enamored with Miami. A California kid is enamored with going across the country to Miami. So I think Texas might have a little bit of work to do there, but I should have an update on him maybe in the War Room or maybe on Orange Bloods at some point, along with Turntine and some others.
That's interesting. Pacific Coast kid that wants to go all the way to the other side of the
country. Yeah. And I'm sure he's probably been to Miami, but I thought that was interesting. Like a Cali kid, like you think, okay, he wants to stay in Cali. That makes sense. But wanting to go to Miami, okay. I don't show that he's taken, and maybe the database just wasn't updated, but I don't show that he's ever, or the Rivals database doesn't show that he's ever taken a visit to Miami. So, he's taken to UCLA. That makes a lot of sense. USC, that makes a lot of sense. Fresno State. But I tell you, he's a guy, he's a 3-star prospect. Luke Sorensen at Anaheim survey. So he's from a kind of a power program. But look at his offers, man. Alabama, Auburn, Colorado, Florida, LSU, Miami, Michigan, Ole Miss, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Penn State, Texas, Texas A&M, UCLA, Wisconsin. I mean, this dude's got some big-time offers. So he's an intriguing prospect. He's like, I talked to him. He said, hey, I'm not a one-trick pony. I'm a true traditional tight end who can block and receive. He said, and he loves special teams, which I thought was interesting. He goes, I love that Jeff Banks is a special teams coordinator. He goes, I love to do it all, man. I want to be on kick coverage. I want to be on punt return, punt coverage. He goes, I like running down there and being the hunter on special teams. So I was like, okay, I like this kid. He's an interesting kid. But he'll be taking his Texas visit June 20th. Yeah.
A June 20th guy. Yeah, it sounds like with all those teams involved, may not be a 3-star by the end of the process.
Yeah, exactly.
If he is that good. That must be a fun argument, Jason. If I'm a coach at USC or UCLA and I'm talking to a Cali kid and he says, man, I really want to go to the beach. I'm kind of looking at Miami. You're what? You know where the beach is, right? Like just go to that.
Listen, the Atlantic Beach versus the Pacific are 2 totally different beaches, man. So
just walk 3 minutes that way, and you might see a girl or 2 between here and there. Come back, and then we'll talk. And then we'll have a discussion.
You'd understand it more because you don't want to go like to Montana or something, right? So go up to the mountains or something.
Yeah, that'd be different, right? If the kid just really says, "I want to go to Colorado," okay. Yeah. As a USC coach, I might not have that argument. But
I'm tired of the beach. I want to go to Colorado. Okay, I kind of get it. I want to go to the beach in Miami. What?
You want a beach, you want palm trees, and you want pretty people. Oh, yeah, we can do that. We got that all day. I got buckets of that right out back. All right, there you go. Another recruiting hour. And of course, it is sponsored by Longhorn Wealth Management. Shout out to the great crew there. John and his crew, we have told you, he's up in the Dallas area and a Dallas Texas X's board member. He's now helping lead out the build out of this Collin County Texas X's chapter. And they have an event coming up. I'll tell you about that in a second. This past Saturday, John and his wife participated in the annual Collin County Texas X's Project Worldwide. It's a charity event benefiting the local Children's Advocacy Center. Now, John wants to invite all the Collin County Longhorn fans come celebrate Texas Independence Day with them at the Brass Tap at City Line in Richardson, right there at 75 and Bush 190. It is Sunday, March 2nd, Texas Independence Day, of course, 5 to 8 p.m. this Sunday. It's a special nighttime happy hour. There'll be a poker tournament involved, so you can reach out to John for details. And in honor of Texas Independence Day, because John's just a good old Texan, he's offering Orange Bloods Live fans free 90-minute private consultations to learn how the certified financial planner like John can help you maximize your wealth, minimize your taxes. Important this time of year. Jason talked about putting taxes together. We're all doing that right now. And secure your legacy. You can call John and the team at 972-707-4900 or go to longhornwealth.net. Schedule that free 90-minute private consultation. John wants to send everybody a happy Texas Independence Day, even though it's a little early. And as always, he's sending all you Longhorn fans a big hook 'em. There's a nice Longhorn picture for you as well. Shout out to John and Longhorn Wealth Management Group. Thanks to all of y'all for jumping in the Specs chat. We appreciate it. We will be back next Wednesday at 10 with another recruiting hour. You know, recruiting never stops, even though we're in the dead period. Doesn't really exist. We have to air quote that one because things are always alive in recruiting, especially when you go change in a couple coaches because the NFL comes calling. We will get that to you next week. Remember, we got House Divided coming up at 12. Speaking of recruiting, Jeff Ketchum with his recruiting thoughts on who he thinks is the number one prospect in the state of Texas that the Longhorns absolutely need to get. There's kind of two or three. I think Jason knows. There's 2 or 3 names Ketch has been trying to figure out. I think he's come to a decision. We'll get to that at noon today. 6 o'clock, it's Football with Friends. They're live from the Combine. Also be looking for that Combine content on Orange Bloods Live in the next couple days. 8:30 tonight, it's the Outsiders, and our Mock 5 top 5 is your 5 favorite Texas DBs of all time. We'll throw that list out. Chance throws the list out. We edit a little bit as it goes along. You can be a part of that tonight at 8:30. The Old Fashioned is tomorrow with Anwar at 9 a.m. Thank y'all for liking, subscribing, and getting those notifications. Remember, if you didn't like on the way in, go ahead and like on the way out because Jason was awesome. You can't tell me Jason wasn't worth a like. I mean, come on. You got to like that on the way out. Get it done. Until next time, this is the Recruiting Hour, and we are Orange Bloods Live. Y'all take care. See you.